Welcome to the True Wealth Investors Real Estate Podcast. Creative investing strategies to help you build true wealth. I'm your host, Chad Harris. Hello, everybody. Today's episode is the second part of a presentation on how to give sellers multiple offers so you get more offers accepted, which is what we're all after, right? So today's portion is how to make seller financing offers and how to talk to that seller so that they understand the benefits to them. Too often, we act like when we are after seller financing, we're trying to get that seller to do something for us. And we'll be much more successful if we can flip that perspective and recognize that there are a lot of benefits for that seller if they give us financing. We just need to explain those benefits to them. So I hope this episode benefits you. As always, build your dream life one door at a time. The problem is that a whole bunch of sellers aren't really helped by a low all cash offer, right? Maybe the reason they're selling their house really isn't that they need the money, it's something else. They don't want to manage the property anymore. They've got multiple family members involved. They have a family member renting the house and not paying rent. Who knows? There's a long list of reasons. And so we need to make another kind of offer to try to satisfy them. All right. And so that is where we're talking about seller financing. So seller financing, when I talked about the two ways we buy property, is where we essentially pay the seller over time. Okay. And so Elias was asking me just this week, he was talking about a seller that he talked to, and we were running the numbers, and it didn't really work for a private lender deal just because of the price compared to the value. And I said, well, the only way it's going to work is if we get seller financing. And he said, well, does that mean I just call and say, will you give me seller financing? Right? Well, most sellers don't understand what seller financing is. So that's a real estate term. So if we ask them for seller financing, they have no idea what we're talking about. And so we need to use language that makes sense to them. So if I give you, Mr. Seller, a little bit of money at closing and pay you the rest over time, would that help you? Right? If I can pay you more for your property, but I don't pay it all up front, I pay you some monthly, would that help you? Because that's what seller financing is. Okay, here's a real quick example subject to financing. This house is in Vandalia. The seller was a couple. They had two kids in the house, had third kid was born, and they just didn't have any room anymore. And so they had good jobs, plenty of money. They could qualify for another loan. And so they went ahead and bought another property that they were going to move into. The problem was that they had no equity in this house because they had refinanced and pulled everything out. And so if they were going to go to closing, they would have to bring money to closing just to pay the closing costs and fees involved. And just something inside of them, they wouldn't closing, right? Which no seller ever wants to bring money to closing. And so they thought the only alternative they had was to hold it as a rental, and they would have to be a property manager. They really didn't want to learn how to be a property manager. And so they were getting ready to move to their new house. They were going to have two payments, and that was their headache. And so when I met them, they came to me through a referral. And when I met with them, I heard their story. I said, how about I give you just a little bit of money for the equity you do have in the house, and I will take over the mortgage payment to the bank, and you'll never have to deal with the house again. And that was exactly what they wanted, right? They didn't want to have a mortgage payment, a second mortgage payment to make, and they didn't want to deal with the house or any tenant in it. And so I solved their problem. we did, I think we worked on this 3 days. I rented it to a great family, great neighborhood. And so that's a situation where it cost me very little money down for a great property just by solving the problem for the seller. All right. So there's a whole bunch of types of seller financing. That example I was talking about was subject to, we're not going to get into the specific documents or the structures of the way they work, but just know that what we're talking about today, how to communicate with a seller, will work for any of these. So we can use a land contract. That's where the deed stays in the seller's name until we pay off the contract as the buyer. We can do subject to, where the deed transfers to our name, but the underlying financing stays in the seller's name. We can do a seller carryback or a wrap mortgage, where we're going to pay the underlying financing and also pay a monthly amount to the seller. A lease option, where we basically rent the house with an option to buy at a set price. Or we can do a whole bunch of different offers with 0% financing. And I just include that because you can get so creative with how you structure it once the interest rate is taken out. So it really doesn't matter what structure you use. A lot of times, the structure you use will kind of be dictated by the underlying financing they have, or what you can get them to agree to, what best fits what they're looking for. But the important thing is that we're going to serve them and explain to them how it benefits them. Okay. Most sellers have no idea that it's actually beneficial to them if they offer us financing and don't get paid all at once. All right. So why do sellers offer financing? Just like lenders, it benefits them, right? The reason they're going to offer us financing is because it's really good for them. And there are 5 major benefits for sellers. Most sellers don't know this, don't understand this. And so in that conversation with them, we need to explain these 5 benefits. If we're not dealing directly with the seller, if we're working with the realtor, we need to make sure we work with a realtor that understands these benefits, because that realtor is going to be explaining to the seller's realtor the benefits, right? They're going to be presenting this on your behalf. And so we want to get across to the seller the benefits for them. One is price. We're willing to pay more for the property if the financing is included. And a lot of sellers are motivated by price, right? If this house is theoretically worth 100,000, if you offer them 70,000 in cash, that kind of hurts. They feel that they're only getting 70 for a house worth 100. But if you say, well, I'll pay you 85 if I can pay you over time, that feels a little better to them, right? So price is one, taxes are another, depending on the structure we use. And this is a really good one for somebody who has either owned the property for a long period of time and taken all the depreciation out, or you see this with sellers right now, where the property has really risen in value. And so if they sell traditional sale and they get all the proceeds paid out, they're going to have a big tax burden there because their tax basis is low. So you can, in some methods, you can defer taxes and stretch it out over years, which is beneficial to them. If you do a really creative lease option, then you can structure it so they never have to pay those taxes. And nobody likes paying taxes, so that's a big benefit to them. Third benefit is it's a way for them to earn monthly income. And this is especially true of retiring landlords. They've been living off the monthly income for years, and what they struggle with most with selling is that they're going to lose that monthly income, right? And So it's almost like they've got the goose, it's been giving them the golden eggs, and now they suddenly feel like they have to kill the goose, which nobody likes. Well, with seller financing, it just means that we take care of the goose and they still get their golden eggs every month. They still get that monthly income. They just don't have to deal with the headaches anymore. They can get an increased return if we ask them, well, if you don't mind me asking, if I pay you all the full price up front, what are you going to do with the money? Most sellers have no idea, right? They don't know where they're going to get a return on this money. It's just going to sit in a bank account. And so we can, if we pay them interest, if we're willing to pay them interest, we can usually pay them more in interest than they would earn somewhere else. And then it's a quick and easy close, which a lot of times sellers are in a pinch. They have this problem, they need to sell, but they've put it off for one reason or another, and they see it as this burden they need to get through. And so if they offer financing, we can close very quickly because that financing usually is a large part of that long wait to close. And so we can close very easily and quickly, which is beneficial to them. Okay, so how on earth we know, a lot of people struggle with this because it's really beneficial to sellers to offer financing, but it is not typical. And very few people really know about it. And so, how do we have the conversation so that it's not like we're holding a lecture or trying to tell them what to do, but we somehow inform them and make them understand the benefits and then ask for the financing from them? All right. How do we do that? That's what we're going to talk about. Super soft skills here. So, number one, when we're talking with the seller or we're talking with the realtor, this interaction should be about the same, right? Number one, we're going to start with questions. So we're going to build rapport with the seller because just like that quote from Zig Ziglar, there is no way for us to make an offer that really serves that seller if we don't understand the problem of the seller, right? Our success is going to be based on actually understanding what their pain point is and what their situation is so that we can structure the offer to fit that. So we're going to start with, why are you selling the house? Usually the first answer you get isn't the real answer, but it's a good place to start. A lot of times they'll want to go into the details of the house, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,800 square feet, whatever it is. And it's just going to take a little bit of a conversation to get down to their motivation. We need to keep digging deeper. And people don't like you asking those personal questions and digging deeper if they don't feel like you're genuine and authentic, right? We have to actually care about them and their story and be interested and be authentic in wanting to know what the real motivation is for why they want to sell the house. And I've always found that if I'm authentic and genuinely have an interest in their story and why they need to sell, that they'll tell me all kinds of things, right? They're very open if we're just authentic with them. So another way to phrase that is, what would make this sale a win for you? What exactly do they need at the end to feel like this was a winning situation? And a lot of times it's not the full sale price of the house, right? I've had people say, well, I just need $10,000 to move closer to family. Or another seller was, I just need to sell the house within 7 days so I have money to move to North Carolina. Okay. It really wasn't about the price. It was about closing within 7 days. So what would make it a win for them? If you don't mind me asking, what will you do with the money after the sale? right? It's just really good to ask a lot of open-ended questions so that you can get a really clear picture of what their motivation is. Is anyone else involved in the decision? That's a good one. I learned that the hard way when I signed a purchase contract with a seller and didn't realize that he had 7 siblings with him on the deed. And so we had to get all 7 to agree to what we'd agreed to. So it's good to know that up front. Who's involved in the decision? Some other questions. Would monthly cash flow help you in any way instead of a lump sum? You'd be amazed how many people, when you ask them that question, they prefer the monthly cash flow. They just never knew they could sell a house and receive monthly cash flow from it, right? But there are plenty of people who either don't know what they would do with the lump sum of money they would get, or are actually nervous about having a lump sum of money sitting in the bank. And so it's much better for them to have monthly cash flow. Are you concerned about the tax consequences? Everybody's concerned about tax consequences. If they're not concerned, when you raise the question, they're going to be like, wait, what are the tax consequences, right? Nobody wants to pay taxes, so it's good to bring that up and ask about it. Would you like this sale to be a part of a legacy for your kids? So many people, and this is really true of retiring landlords. They got into real estate as a long-term investment, and they had this dream that someday their kids would take over the rentals, right? They'd leave this business for their kids. And too often the kids have no interest in it. But if the seller sells with seller financing, the kids can still get monthly income when the seller passes, right? It's a way to structure it so that investor still leaves a legacy for their kids, a monetary legacy, but they're not leaving a burden of management and any of those things for their kids. What would make this sale a win for you? Or repeat that one. That's a good one for them. Okay, so we're going to ask a whole bunch of questions. Okay, and we're going to structure it in a way so that they get paid over time and it really fits exactly what they want. If we can structure it in a way that it fits what they want, then there is no reason for them not to say yes, right? So I know in your head, a lot of people are thinking, well, but what about when they say this, right? If I tell a seller that I'm going to give them a little bit of money now, and then I'm going to take control of their house, and I'll give them a little bit of money each month into the future, probably a lot of us have an objection in our head. But what about, they're going to say, but what about this? What about that? Okay. I would encourage you, don't even think about it as objections. Think about it as just questions. It's part of the process. And usually it's something new for them. It's something they haven't thought about. So the ways to address these, number one, address them before they ask. So if we address that objection that we know they have, because all sellers have some similar objections, if we address it before they ask it, that demonstrates that we really understand their situation. Okay. And that helps build that rapport. So what happens if I don't make the payment? Or a better question would be, what happens if the tenant doesn't pay the rent, right? In which case you can say, you, Mr. Seller, are just like the bank. You get your payment every month, regardless of whether the tenant pays rent. Okay, that's reassuring to them. Then they know they're getting their payment either way. That's one example. So just consider it part of the process, right? In this conversation, we're just going to throw out a bunch of information while we're hearing their story, so that they know that we understand them and we're structuring this to benefit them. And then once we really address the common objections, they're going to still have questions of us probably. And I put those into 2 categories. So they are either reasonable objections or unreasonable objections. Reasonable objections would be things that we would all wonder about, right? Um, how do we handle the closing? Who provides the paperwork for the loan? All the details of how this transaction is actually going to happen. Okay. Those are all reasonable objections. Any seller should have those questions. If we were selling our house to somebody and offering them financing, we would have those same questions. And so reasonable objections, we're going to answer the question. We're going to affirm for them that this is still a good idea, that this is something we go through all the time and that happens. It's not that rare, and make them feel better about the whole process. If there's something we don't know, if they have a question and we've never dealt with it or thought with it, then we need to just be transparent and say, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. I know other people in our Real Estate Investor Association who do. Let me ask them and I'll get back to you. Okay. So always just be authentic and genuine and upfront with them. Now, the alternative to the reasonable objections are the unreasonable objections. Okay. And so unreasonable objections would be something like, well, this house is worth 100. I need 150 because the dream house I have in Florida, 150 is the down payment. Or I'm willing to offer financing but I really need 15% interest. Okay. There are going to be those random sellers who want way more than anything we can offer. And so in that situation, the worst thing to do, what we never want to do is start to make it confrontational, right? We don't want to say, well, I can't do 15%. That's outrageous. How about 6%? We don't want it to be this confrontation where one of us is going to win and the other one's going to lose. So if they have an unreasonable objection, I always handle it with talking about how we're in this together, right? I understand how 15% would be nice. Who wouldn't want 15% interest? But you must understand that if I have a really high loan payment, then that puts a lot of risk on me, which in essence puts risk on you. We need to structure this so that it's a payment I can handle easily and it's profitable for you. We're in this together, right? If you structure the conversation that way, it is totally different. All the tensions diffused, and us and this seller are trying to figure out a way to structure it that's beneficial for both of us. We're on the same team and we're working together to solve this problem. Okay. That will solve 90% of those unreasonable objections. All right. And then always bring it back to opportunity and impact. I love these two words. I use them all the time in how I relate to private lenders and sellers because they are really what motivates people. And so with a seller, we want to always bring it back to the opportunity they have to sell their house and get these additional benefits. So if they offer us financing, they're not only going to sell their house, they're also going to get a higher price and they're going to get monthly income and they're going to get all these great things, right? What a great opportunity it is for them. And then impact, or that emotional response, right? For a lot of sellers, it's really stressful. They rarely sell a house. It's big numbers for them. And so we need to remind them how good life is going to be on the other side, what the impact of this sale is going to be. So once you get that $10,000 and you move to be with your family, what's that first weekend going to be like, right? What are you going to do with your family that first night you're in your new place down there? Just always bring them back to, this is a stressful thing, I understand, but it's going to be worth it in the end. It's going to be better for you on the other side. So if you do those things, that will overcome any concerns they have. All right, here's another quick seller financing example. This was the farm we purchased. I had mailed out letters, direct mail, and I was getting calls back, and this seller called me and asked a few questions and then told me he didn't want to sell. And I thought, well, okay, no problem. I enjoyed talking with you. And I saved his number in my phone as, Southeast Ohio landowner, unmotivated. And which motivation's the key, right? If somebody's unmotivated to sell, it's hard to get a deal no matter what. But he kept calling me back. And so the next month he would call and we'd talk, and we talked about all kinds of different things, never the farm. And really, never the terms of a deal. What we talked about were family. We talked about our motivations, why we like the outdoors. We talked about how to manage wildlife and just the things that we had in common, right? How we both related to land. And so his issue was he didn't want to sell right away, but he lived out of state and he was just getting run around because he had to keep driving up and mowing the grass every 2 weeks, and the maintenance was just killing him. He loved the land. He wanted somebody else to take care of it like he did, but he didn't want to have the maintenance on it. And so we talked for, I think it was 9 months. And I was kind of confused by why he kept calling, even though, hey, I enjoy the conversations, right? I'm a friendly guy. But finally I said, okay, Mr. Seller, what exactly, I know you don't want to sell right away. What exactly would it take for you to want to sell now? And he said, well, I would like to sell and have the money from the sale for the next property that I'm going to buy that doesn't take maintenance, but I don't want to lose that one hunting season in the transition. So I want to still be able to have a hunting season. I said, done, right? I'll purchase the property. You can use the down payment to purchase your next property, and I won't take possession of the land for 6 months. You can have your last hunting season. And once I solved his problem for him, he gave us seller financing, and we worked out the details and closed very quickly after that. It was just a matter of figuring out exactly what that pain point was and how we could solve his problem for him. And then for the down payment on that, we used money from a private lender. We offered them a loan on another rental property. So kind of a unique deal. We are adding new episodes every week, so make sure and subscribe and check out all of our content at truewealthinvestors.com.